My name is Connie Matthews, 63 years old, and I've learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give your child is the courage to stand up for herself. When I bought my daughter Emma a beautiful villa as a wedding present, I never imagined her manipulative husband would move his entire family in and turn her into their personal servant. But that's exactly what happened. The look in her eyes when I visited broke my heart, but what I said next changed everything. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're from, and hit that subscribe button while I share how one sentence transformed my daughter's life. I built my real estate business from nothing but grit and determination. After my husband Thomas died when Emma was just 7, I had to be both mom and dad while keeping our financial ship afloat. Those early years were tough, working 14-hour days while making sure Emma never felt neglected. Every school play, every soccer game, I was there cheering her on, even if it meant staying up until 3 in the morning to finish paperwork. Emma was always such a sweet child with a heart too big for her own good. Even as a little girl, she would give away her lunch if she saw another kid without one. She rescued stray animals and brought them home, nursed wounded birds back to health, and volunteered at the local animal shelter throughout high school. That compassion is what makes her special, but it also made her vulnerable to people who would take advantage of her kindness. As Emma grew into a beautiful, intelligent young woman, I made sure she knew the value of independence. She worked summer jobs to save for college and earned a scholarship to study education at the state university. I was so proud watching her cross that stage at graduation, the first in our family to earn a college degree. We've always been exceptionally close, more like best friends than mother and daughter. Weekend shopping trips, holiday baking marathons, late night talks about everything under the sun. Emma could tell me anything, and I mean anything, without fear of judgment. That openness kept us connected through her teenage years when so many parents lose touch with their kids. That all changed when she met Jack Sullivan during her first year teaching kindergarten. He was charming, I'll give him that. Tall, with that perfectly styled dark hair and a smile that seemed to light up a room. He worked in finance and never missed an opportunity to mention the important clients he dealt with. I remember the first time Emma brought him home for dinner. He complimented my cooking, asked thoughtful questions about my business, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. But something felt off. Call it mother's intuition or just years of dealing with smooth-talking real estate clients, but I noticed how his eyes would harden when Emma spoke, how he subtly redirected conversations when they weren't centered on him. The way he placed his hand on Emma's lower back seemed less like affection and more like steering. Still, my daughter was glowing with happiness, so I kept my concerns to myself. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Within 6 months, Jack had proposed with a ring so large it looked uncomfortable on Emma's delicate hand. When she called me breathless with excitement, I forced enthusiasm into my voice while my stomach knotted with worry. She was 32, certainly old enough to make her own decisions, but everything was moving so fast. The wedding was planned for the following spring, an elegant affair at a country club where Jack was a member. As the date approached, I noticed Emma calling less frequently. When we did talk, the conversations revolved around Jack's preferences for the wedding, Jack's promotion, Jack's family traditions. My outspoken, independent daughter seemed to be fading into the background of her own life. Despite my reservations, I wanted to give them a meaningful wedding gift. Emma had always dreamed of a home with a garden where she could grow her own vegetables and have space for rescue dogs. When a stunning Mediterranean-style villa came on the market in a desirable neighborhood, I knew it was perfect. 4 bedrooms, a gourmet kitchen, a beautiful backyard with mature fruit trees, and a small guest house that could serve as Emma's home office for tutoring students. The price tag was steep, but seeing Emma's face when I handed her the keys made every penny worth it. For the first time in months, I saw my real daughter again, jumping up and down like a little girl at Christmas, tears streaming down her face as she hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Mom, this is too much," she whispered. "I can't believe you did this for us." Jack seemed genuinely surprised too, though I caught a calculating look in his eyes as he surveyed the property. He quickly masked it with gratitude, hugging me and calling me Mom for the first time. "You've given us such a wonderful start to our marriage." He set his arm around Emma's waist. "We'll take good care of this beautiful home, I promise." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. For Emma's sake, I pushed aside my lingering doubts and embraced the hope that this generous gift would help cement their happiness together. The first few months after the wedding seemed to confirm that my worries had been unfounded. Emma called regularly with updates about decorating projects and gardening adventures. She'd painted the master bedroom a soothing sage green, planted a vegetable garden in the backyard, and was turning the smallest bedroom into a cozy library. Jack had been supportive, she said, even building her raised garden beds on the weekends. I visited every couple of weeks, bringing housewarming gifts and helping Emma settle into her new role as a homeowner. The villa was gradually transforming into a warm, inviting space that reflected my daughter's personality. Photos from their honeymoon in Greece adorned the walls, comfortable furniture invited you to sit and stay a while, and the kitchen always smelled of something delicious baking. Jack's parents visited from Chicago shortly after the honeymoon. They seemed pleasant enough, if a bit reserved. His mother, Margaret, complimented the house repeatedly, running her hands over the granite countertops and commenting on the quality of the appliances. His father, Robert, asked detailed questions about the neighborhood and property values that made me slightly uncomfortable, but I chalked it up to friendly interest. Emma seemed to be navigating her new relationship with her in-laws gracefully, though I noticed she was more subdued in their presence. Jack became more attentive to his parents than to Emma during their visit, but that didn't strike me as unusual for a son seeing his parents after a long absence. When they left after a week's stay, Emma seemed relieved but insisted she'd enjoyed getting to know them better. Everything seemed normal, healthy, exactly what you'd hope for newlyweds starting their life together. If only I had known what was coming next. The first hint that something was wrong came about 4 months after the wedding. Emma's calls became less frequent, and when I did hear from her, our conversations were shorter. She always had a reason why she couldn't talk long or meet for our usual Sunday brunch. She was grading papers, or Jack had surprised her with plans, or she wasn't feeling well. When I suggested coming over to bring soup when she was sick, she quickly declined, saying it was just a minor cold and she didn't want to infect me. That struck me as odd. Emma had never before turned down my homemade chicken soup, a family tradition, whenever either of us felt under the weather. After nearly 3 weeks without seeing my daughter, I decided to stop by unannounced with some fresh-baked cinnamon rolls, her favorite. It was a Saturday morning, and I figured even if she and Jack had plans, I could at least drop off the treats and see her face for a few minutes. The moment Emma opened the door, I knew something had changed. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she was wearing an old sweatshirt I hadn't seen since her college days. Behind her, I could see the living room had been rearranged. The cozy reading nook she had created near the bay window was gone, replaced by a large leather recliner that certainly wasn't Emma's style. "Mom?" She seemed startled, quickly stepping outside and partially closing the door behind her. "I wasn't expecting you." "I know, sweetheart. I just missed you and thought I'd drop these off." I held up the box of cinnamon rolls still warm from the oven. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, everything's fine, just busy." Her eyes darted back toward the house. "Jack's parents are visiting again." "Oh, that's nice. I'd love to say hello." I moved toward the door, but Emma blocked my path slightly. "They're still getting ready for the day. Maybe another time would be better." Before I could respond, the door opened wider, and Margaret Sullivan appeared dressed immaculately in designer clothes that seemed excessive for a Saturday morning at home. "Connie, what a lovely surprise." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Emma, darling, you should have told us your mother was coming. We would have gotten up earlier." "I didn't know Mom just stopped by." Emma explained, a note of anxiety in her voice that I'd never heard before. "Well, don't leave your mother standing on the porch. Come in, Connie. Robert and I have been enjoying an extended visit. The villa is so spacious we hardly feel like we're imposing." Extended visit. This was the first I'd heard about Jack's parents staying for more than their initial week. As I stepped inside, I noticed more changes. Photos of Emma and Jack had been replaced with Sullivan family portraits. Throw pillows I had helped Emma select were gone, substituted with formal, uncomfortable-looking decorative ones. A large display cabinet now dominated one wall, filled with what appeared to be Margaret's china collection. Jack emerged from the kitchen, coffee mug in hand. "Connie, good morning. Would you like some coffee?" Emma was just about to make breakfast for everyone. I glanced at Emma, who nodded quickly and moved toward the kitchen. "I should get started on that. The cinnamon rolls will be a nice addition." Following her into the kitchen, I noticed Emma's beautiful herb garden outside the window now contained unfamiliar plants. The kitchen itself had been reorganized with equipment and ingredients in different places than where Emma had originally arranged them. How long have your in-laws been staying? I asked quietly as she began cracking eggs into a bowl. About 2 weeks now, she answered, not meeting my eyes. Their condo in Chicago is being renovated, so they needed somewhere to stay. Jack offered since we have the space. 2 weeks? Why didn't you mention it during our calls? Emma shrugged, her movements tense as she whisked the eggs. I didn't think it was important. It's just temporary. Jack appeared in the doorway. Emma, my father would prefer his eggs over medium, not scrambled. And could you make sure to use the good china? My mother noticed you used the everyday plates yesterday. Of course, Emma replied, immediately dumping the whisked eggs and starting over. I watched speechless as my confident, independent daughter transformed into someone I barely recognized, jumping to accommodate her husband's commands without question. Can I help? I offered, moving to the stove. No need, Connie, Jack interjected. Emma has her system down now. Mother has been teaching her how to properly manage a household. Right, sweetheart. Emma nodded, her focus entirely on the eggs, as if cooking them perfectly was suddenly the most important task in the world. Throughout breakfast, I observed the subtle dynamics at play. Margaret commented on Emma's cooking, pointing out that the toast was slightly too dark. Robert discussed their plans to attend a country club event with Jack, later clearly assuming Emma would not be included. Jack barely acknowledged Emma except to ask her to refill his coffee or fetch something from the kitchen. When I tried to engage Emma in conversation about her teaching job or the garden, Margaret invariably interrupted with stories about Jack's childhood or their family connections. Emma sat quietly, speaking only when spoken to directly, nothing like the vibrant woman who used to dominate conversations with her passionate opinions and infectious laughter. After breakfast, Emma immediately began clearing dishes while the others moved to the living room. I stayed behind to help her, desperate for a moment alone. Emma, is everything really okay? I whispered, loading the dishwasher alongside her. She paused, hands trembling slightly as she rinsed a plate. Everything's fine, Mom. It's just been an adjustment having them here. They have certain expectations about how things should be done. But this is your home. You and Jack should set the expectations. Emma glanced nervously toward the living room. Jack says family is everything. His parents have done so much for him, and he wants to make them comfortable. It's important to him, so it's important to me. Before I could press further, Jack called from the other room. Emma, could you bring those pastries your mother brought and some fresh coffee? Coming, she called back hastily, wiping her hands and preparing a tray. I left shortly afterward, unsettled by what I had witnessed, but uncertain how to address it. Emma was an adult, and this was her marriage. Perhaps I was overreacting to normal family dynamics different from our own. Still, as I drove home, I couldn't shake the image of my daughter's dimmed spirit and the strange new household hierarchy that had emerged in what was supposed to be her dream home. I tried calling more frequently after that visit, but Emma often didn't pick up. When she did, our conversations were brief and superficial. She always had an excuse for why we couldn't get together, and I could hear the tension in her voice when Jack or his parents were nearby. My concern grew with each passing week, but I was caught in that difficult parental position of wanting to help while respecting my adult daughter's autonomy. I had to find the right moment to understand what was really happening in that villa and how I could support Emma without pushing her away. That moment would come sooner than I expected, and what I discovered would finally push me past the boundaries of polite restraint. 2 months after my uncomfortable breakfast visit, I decided I couldn't wait any longer to check on Emma. My calls were going straight to voicemail, and my texts received only brief, generic responses that sometimes took days to arrive. My mother's intuition was screaming that something was seriously wrong. I chose a Tuesday afternoon, knowing Emma should be home from school by then. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed several unfamiliar cars parked both in the driveway and along the street. Had Jack's parents finally left and new visitors arrived, or were they hosting some kind of event? When Emma opened the door, she looked even more exhausted than before. Her clothes hung loosely on her frame, suggesting she'd lost weight, and her normally lustrous hair was dull and hastily pulled back. The sparkle in her eyes that had defined her personality since childhood was completely gone. Mom. She seemed genuinely shocked to see me. Why didn't you call first? I tried, sweetheart, several times. Your voicemail is full and you haven't been responding to my texts. I stepped forward to hug her, alarmed by how fragile she felt in my arms. I was worried about you. Before Emma could respond, a young man I didn't recognize appeared in the hallway behind her. Emma, who's at the door? Mom's asking about dinner? Emma's shoulders tensed visibly. It's my mother, Brian. Tell your mom I'll be in the kitchen in a minute. Brian who was Brian? The confusion must have shown on my face because Emma quickly whispered, Jack's younger brother? He's staying with us for a while. A while? How long has he been here, and who else is staying here? I asked, as she reluctantly led me inside. The villa I had purchased as a wedding gift was unrecognizable. What had once been a tastefully decorated, peaceful home now looked like a crowded boarding house. Shoes cluttered the entryway, unfamiliar coats hung on hooks, and the living room furniture had been completely rearranged to accommodate more seating. Personal items I didn't recognize were scattered everywhere, from magazines to electronic devices to half-empty coffee mugs. As we moved through the house, I was stunned to see not just Jack's parents and brother, but an older man watching television in what had been Emma's library, a young woman talking loudly on her phone in the dining room, and another couple unpacking groceries in the kitchen. Emma, who are all these people? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. She pulled me into a small powder room off the hallway and closed the door, her voice dropping to a whisper. Jack's family. His parents are still here, plus his brother Brian, who lost his apartment, his sister Ashley, and her husband Greg, who are between houses, and his uncle Paul, who's visiting from Florida. I was speechless. Emma, that's 7 additional people living in your home. How long has this been going on? Brian moved in about 6 weeks ago. Ashley and Greg came 3 weeks later. Uncle Paul is just visiting for a month. She recited this information mechanically as if she'd rehearsed it. And you're okay with this? I searched her face for any sign of the independent woman I'd raised. It's just temporary, she insisted, though her eyes told a different story. Family helps family, that's what Jack says. But what about your space, your privacy? This was supposed to be your newlywed home. I'm managing, Emma said, though her exhausted appearance suggested otherwise. I've adjusted my teaching schedule so I can be home to cook dinner for everyone. Margaret has certain dietary preferences, and Brian is allergic to shellfish, and Ashley's husband only eats organic meat, so meals take more planning now. My blood pressure was rising with every word. Emma, you're working full-time as a teacher and then coming home to cook and clean for 9 adults? A knock at the bathroom door interrupted us. Emma, it was Margaret's voice. The chicken needs to be started soon if dinner is going to be ready by 6. Paul takes his heart medication with food so we can't be late. I'll be right there, Emma called back, her voice instantly shifting to a placating tone. She turned back to me. I need to get started on dinner, Mom. Maybe we can talk another time. As she opened the door, I followed her to the kitchen, determined not to leave without understanding the full situation. What I witnessed next broke my heart completely. Emma tied an apron around her waist and immediately began pulling ingredients from the refrigerator, while Margaret sat at the kitchen island directing her every move. The onions need to be diced smaller than that, Emma, and remember to wash the chicken exactly as I showed you. Last time you didn't remove the giblets properly. Jack's sister Ashley entered, dropped an empty glass in the sink, and said, When you're done with dinner prep, could you wash my blouse for tomorrow? The blue one with the buttons. I need it for an interview. Neither woman offered to help as Emma juggled multiple tasks, chopping vegetables, marinating chicken, and setting the table with Margaret's specified dinnerware. Jack came in, briefly kissed his mother on the cheek, completely ignored Emma, and announced he was going to play video games with Brian and Greg until dinner was ready. Don't forget Uncle Paul needs his tea with lemon and honey, he added as an afterthought to Emma, who nodded without looking up from her work. I stood in the corner of the kitchen, witnessing my daughter being treated like an unpaid servant in the home I had gifted her. When she dropped a spoon and Margaret sighed dramatically as if Emma had shattered an irreplaceable heirloom, I saw tears well in my daughter's eyes before she quickly blinked them away. That was the moment I knew I had to intervene. This wasn't just extended family visiting or temporary housing arrangements. This was systematic exploitation of my daughter's kind nature and complete disregard for her as an equal partner in her own marriage and home. I approached Emma at the stove and whispered, Can we talk outside for a moment? It's important. She glanced nervously at Margaret. I really need to finish dinner prep, Mom. Margaret can watch the chicken for 5 minutes, I said firmly, making direct eye contact with Jack's mother, who looked startled at being addressed directly. Emma and I need to discuss something privately. Before Margaret could object, I guided Emma toward the back patio, closing the door behind us. In the fading afternoon light, the exhaustion on my daughter's face was even more apparent. Emma, this isn't right, I said gently. You're being treated like hired help, not the lady of the house. It's just until they find other arrangements, she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. Jack says family sticks together through tough times. Where is Jack's loyalty to you, his wife? I asked. Why isn't he helping you with all these responsibilities? He works hard at his job. Emma defended weakly, and he's always been close to his family. I knew that when I married him. Did you know he planned to move his entire extended family into your home? A flash of something crossed Emma's face, quickly suppressed. No, but they needed help. His parents' condo renovation is taking longer than expected, and Brian lost his job, and Ashley and Greg's house sale fell through. And what about your needs? I pressed. Your comfort in your own home, your marriage. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away as the patio door opened and Jack stepped out. Everything okay out here? His tone was pleasant, but his eyes were cold as they flicked between us. Mom's wondering about the chicken, Emma. We're just catching up, I said smoothly. Mother-daughter stuff. Well, dinner won't cook itself, Jack replied with a tight smile. And everyone's getting hungry. Emma immediately moved toward the door. I should get back to it. Jack placed his hand on her lower back in that controlling gesture I'd noticed when they were dating, but now it seemed less like guidance and more like ownership. As she disappeared inside, he lingered on the patio with me. It's nice that you visit Connie, but maybe call next time. Emma's very busy managing the household now. So many mouths to feed. His tone was light, but the message was clear. I was an intrusion. I've been trying to call, I replied calmly, though inside I was seething. Emma doesn't seem to have time to return my calls anymore. Family life gets hectic. He shrugged. You understand. I do understand family. I agreed. I also understand marriage and partnership. Something hardened in Jack's expression. Emma and I have our own understanding of partnership. She's happy to support my family during their time of need. That's what a good wife does. With that parting statement, he gestured for me to precede him back into the house. I knew pushing further at that moment would only make things worse for Emma, so I said my goodbyes, promising to call again soon. As I drove home, my mind raced with concern and a growing anger. This was no longer about respecting my daughter's marriage. This was about protecting her from exploitation. But I needed to be strategic. A frontal assault would likely backfire, causing Emma to defend Jack out of loyalty or fear. I needed more information about what was really happening in that house, and then I needed a plan that would free Emma without pushing her further into isolation. As a businesswoman who had built a successful real estate empire, I knew how to research, strategize, and execute when necessary. And as a mother who loved her daughter fiercely, I was prepared to do whatever it took to help Emma reclaim her home and her dignity, even if that meant taking drastic measures against the family who had invaded her life. The next morning, I called Patricia Mendez, a private investigator I'd worked with on several real estate deals where potential buyers had raised red flags. I explained the situation, emphasizing that I wanted background information on the Sullivan family without any direct contact that might get back to Emma or Jack. I'm not looking to cause trouble, I told Patricia. I just need to understand what I'm dealing with. Something doesn't add up about this whole family suddenly needing housing all at once. Patricia was discreet and efficient, promising to have preliminary information within a few days. In the meantime, I tried calling Emma again, unsurprised when it went to voicemail. I left a casual message, making no mention of my concerns, just telling her I loved her and was always available if she needed to talk. 3 days later, Patricia arrived at my office with a thick folder. You were right to be suspicious, she said, laying out documents on my desk. The Sullivan family has a pattern of financial issues and frankly taking advantage of people. According to Patricia's findings, Jack's parents had been evicted from 3 different apartments in the past decade for non-payment of rent, despite Robert Sullivan's supposedly prestigious position at an investment firm. That firm, it turned out, had been cited twice for unethical practices, though no formal charges were ever filed. Jack's brother Brian had a history of short-term employment, usually ending when money went missing from employers. Nothing had ever been proven, but the pattern was suspicious. Sister Ashley and her husband Greg had defaulted on 2 mortgages and had a string of credit card debt and collections. Most disturbing of all, Patricia had uncovered text messages between Jack and his father from before the wedding, discussing the living arrangement opportunity that marriage to Emma would provide. They had been planning this move-in situation before Jack had even said, "I do." There's no evidence of outright illegal activity, Patricia concluded, but they're definitely financial opportunists who prey on people's goodwill, and based on their credit reports and bank records I was able to access, none of them have any intention of moving out anytime soon. They're not looking for other housing or saving for deposits. They've settled in. My hands shook as I closed the folder. The calculated nature of their exploitation made me physically ill. This wasn't a family temporarily down on their luck. This was a coordinated effort to take advantage of my daughter and, by extension, my generosity. "There's one more thing," Patricia added, sliding a final document across the desk. "I did some digging into the property records for the villa. Since you purchased it as a gift, I wanted to check whose names were on the deed." I glanced at the document, confused. It should be in Emma's name. That was the gift. Patricia tapped the paper. "It's in Emma's name and yours as joint tenants with right of survivorship. Jack's name isn't on it at all." "That's right," I said, memory returning. "My attorney advised setting it up that way for estate planning purposes to avoid probate. I had forgotten that detail." "Well, it's an important detail now," Patricia pointed out. "Legally, that house belongs to you and Emma, not Jack, not his family, just you two." A plan began forming in my mind. I had the legal right to determine who lived in that house, but I needed to be careful about how I used that information. Emma was still emotionally entangled with Jack, and pushing too hard could damage our relationship permanently. "One last question," I said to Patricia. "Did you find any evidence of physical abuse? Anything that would suggest Emma is in immediate danger?" Patricia shook her head. "Nothing physical that I could document, but emotional manipulation, isolation from support systems, economic control, those are all forms of abuse too, and there's plenty of evidence for those." I nodded, thanking Patricia for her thorough work. After she left, I sat at my desk for a long time thinking about my next steps. I needed to witness the full family dynamic myself before confronting them. I needed Emma to see their behavior through fresh eyes, and most importantly, I needed to create a safe space for her to make her own decision to leave that situation. The following Sunday, I called the villa and managed to reach Jack instead of Emma. Using my most pleasant voice, I invited myself to Sunday dinner, mentioning I had some local business connections that might interest his father. Jack, always eager for networking opportunities, readily agreed. When Sunday arrived, I dressed carefully in a conservative but expensive suit that projected authority and confidence. I brought an expensive bottle of wine and a dessert from an upscale bakery as peace offerings. My plan was simple: observe, document mentally, and look for the right moment to speak with Emma alone. The scene that greeted me was even worse than my last visit. The villa was now completely transformed into the Sullivan family compound, with Emma's personal touches all but erased. Family photos dominated the walls, knickknacks that clearly belonged to Margaret cluttered every surface, and the furnishings had been rearranged to accommodate the extended family's preferences. Emma answered the door looking thinner than ever, dark circles prominent under her eyes despite her attempt to cover them with makeup. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes and took the wine and dessert with genuine thanks, commenting that it would be nice to have something special for dinner. In the living room, the entire Sullivan clan was gathered watching a football game, comfortable and clearly at home. Jack's father barely acknowledged my arrival, his attention fixed on the television. Margaret offered a cold greeting while the others gave cursory nods before returning to the game. Only Jack made an effort to welcome me, though his smile seemed calculated rather than genuine. "Emma's just finishing up dinner," he explained, gesturing toward the kitchen. "Should be ready soon." I excused myself to help Emma, finding her frantically trying to manage multiple dishes at once. The kitchen was a mess with pots bubbling on every burner and ingredients scattered across the counters. This was a woman cooking for 9 adults with no assistance whatsoever. Can I help? I offered, already rolling up my sleeves. Would you mind watching the gravy? She asked gratefully. I need to check the roast, but I'm afraid the gravy will burn if I leave it. As we worked side by side, I noticed Emma wincing occasionally when she lifted heavy dishes. When she reached for something on a high shelf, her sleeve pulled back, revealing a large bruise on her forearm. What happened there? I asked casually, though my heart rate accelerated. Oh, just bumped into the door handle, she said quickly, pulling her sleeve down. I've been so clumsy lately. Whether the bruise was truly accidental or something more sinister, the fact that Emma was physically deteriorating from exhaustion was undeniable. I helped her finish the elaborate meal, noting that she had prepared special versions of several dishes to accommodate everyone's supposed dietary needs. When dinner was served, the family descended on the dining room like locusts, taking their customary seats without helping to bring out the food. Emma made multiple trips between kitchen and dining room, serving everyone before finally sitting down herself. By then, most of the family was already eating, with no one waiting for the woman who had prepared everything. Throughout the meal, I observed the family dynamics with growing anger. Jack's father dominated the conversation, boasting about business deals that sounded questionable at best. Margaret critiqued every aspect of the meal, from the temperature of the potatoes to the seasoning and the gravy. Brian and Uncle Paul discussed sports without including Emma in the conversation, while Ashley complained about the job market between bites of the food Emma had spent hours preparing. Most telling was Jack's behavior. He completely ignored Emma unless he needed something, addressing all his attention to his family members. When Emma tried to contribute to the conversation, he subtly talked over her or changed the subject. The few times he acknowledged her were to request more food or point out something that needed her attention, like refilling water glasses or fetching condiments. When Brian dropped his napkin on the floor and simply snapped his fingers at Emma to get her to pick it up for him, I saw something break in my daughter's eyes. It wasn't anger or resentment, which would have been healthy responses. It was resignation, the look of someone who had accepted their role as less than and as unworthy of basic respect. That was the moment I knew I had to act regardless of the fallout. My daughter was disappearing before my eyes, replaced by a hollow shell who existed only to serve others. The time for subtle intervention had passed. As Emma rose to clear plates and bring dessert, I stood as well. Before we have dessert, I announced, my voice carrying with the authority I'd developed over decades in business, I'd like to discuss something important with all of you. The table fell silent, surprised by my assertiveness. Jack narrowed his eyes slightly, clearly unhappy with my disruption of the family dinner. Connie, perhaps we could talk privately after dinner. He suggested, his tone making it clear this wasn't really a request. No, Jack. This concerns everyone at this table. I looked around at the surprised faces of his family members, particularly those of you who have taken up residence here. Emma froze halfway to the kitchen, her face pale with anxiety. Mom, please, she whispered. I met her eyes, trying to convey all my love and support in one look. Then I turned back to the table and delivered the line that would change everything. This villa is in my name and Emma's name only. Everyone not on the deed has exactly 7 days to leave, or I'm filing for eviction. The silence that followed my announcement was deafening. For several seconds, no one moved or spoke, as if they couldn't quite process what I had said. Jack was the first to recover his charming mask, slipping to reveal the anger beneath. That's ridiculous, he scoffed, though I noticed uncertainty in his eyes. This is my house too. Emma and I are married. I reached into my purse and pulled out copies of the property deed that Patricia had provided. Actually, no, the villa is owned jointly by Emma and me. Your name isn't on any of the paperwork, never has been. I placed the documents on the table where everyone could see them. I purchased this home as a gift for Emma, not as communal housing for the entire Sullivan family. Jack's father was the next to react, his face reddening. Now, see here, Connie. This is a family matter that doesn't concern you. Jack and Emma have graciously opened their home to us during a difficult time. A difficult time that has apparently lasted for months with no end in sight, I replied calmly. And it absolutely concerns me when my daughter is being treated like an unpaid housekeeper in her own home. That's not fair, Margaret protested, her voice shrill. Emma's part of our family now. Family takes care of family. Is that what you call this? I gestured around the table. Emma cooking and cleaning for 7 adults while all of you contribute nothing. Emma being ordered around and criticized in the home I purchased for her happiness. That's not family taking care of family, that's exploitation. Jack stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. You have no right to come in here and make demands. This is between Emma and me. I have every legal right, I corrected him. My name is on the deed, and as Emma's mother, I have a moral obligation to speak up when I see her being mistreated. Mom, please, Emma finally spoke, her voice trembling. Let's not do this now. I softened my tone, addressing her directly. Emma, sweetheart, look at yourself. You've lost weight, you're exhausted, you're isolated from your friends and family. This isn't healthy, and it isn't what you deserve. Jack moved to Emma's side, placing a possessive hand on her shoulder. Emma knows how much I love her. We discussed taking in my family. She agreed to all of this. Did she agree before or after you wore down her resistance? I challenged. Before or after you made her feel guilty for having boundaries? Before or after you convinced her that saying no would make her a bad wife? Something in my words seemed to resonate with Emma. I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes, quickly followed by confusion. She was starting to see the manipulation, but years of conditioning don't dissolve in an instant. Jack's brother Brian broke the tension with an accusatory question directed at Jack. You told us your name was on the deed. You said this was your house too. It is my house, Jack insisted, though his confidence was clearly shaken. Marriage means sharing everything. Not legally, it doesn't, I interjected. Not in this case, and I'm prepared to enforce my rights as an owner if necessary. The family dynamics shifted before my eyes. What had been a united front against me suddenly fractured as Jack's family realized he had misled them about his legal standing in the home. You said you owned this place, his sister Ashley accused. You promised we could stay as long as we needed. He doesn't own anything here, I stated firmly. And my deadline stands. 7 days to find new accommodations or I begin formal eviction proceedings which will become part of the public record. Robert Sullivan, who had built his career on appearances of respectability, paled at the mention of public eviction records. Now there's no need for legal action. We can discuss this reasonably. I've tried reason, I replied. I've watched for months as my daughter disappeared into a role she never signed up for. The time for discussion has passed. I turned to Emma, who stood frozen between the dining room and kitchen, looking overwhelmed by the confrontation. Emma, would you join me in the garden for a few minutes? We need to talk privately. Jack started to object, but his father placed a restraining hand on his arm, apparently recognizing the precariousness of their position. Emma hesitated, glancing at Jack, then back at me. In that moment, I held my breath, knowing this was the crucial turning point. If she chose to stay with Jack to continue defending the indefensible, it would be much harder to help her. To my immense relief, she nodded slightly and moved toward the patio doors. I followed, feeling Jack's furious gaze on my back, but refusing to acknowledge it. Once outside in the garden that Emma had lovingly planted, but now had little time to tend, I guided her to a small bench beneath an orange tree. I'm sorry for causing a scene. I began taking her hands in mine. But I couldn't stand by and watch anymore. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to do, Mom. Everything's so confused. I thought I was doing the right thing, supporting Jack and his family. He said that's what marriage is about, compromise and sacrifice. Marriage is about mutual compromise and shared sacrifice, I corrected gently. Not one person giving everything while the other takes. That's not love, Emma. That's control. The tears spilled over, running down her cheeks. But I promised to be a good wife. For better or worse, remember. And his family really did need help. Need help, yes. Move in permanently and treat you like a servant, no. I squeezed her hands. Sweetheart, I need to ask you something important and I need you to be honest with me. Are you afraid of Jack? Has he ever hurt you physically? Emma shook her head. No, not physically. He gets angry sometimes, raises his voice, but he's never hit me. And that bruise on your arm? She looked down at her sleeve. That really was an accident. I was carrying too many groceries and bumped into the door. I believed her, but continued gently. Emotional abuse is real too, Emma. The way he isolates you, controls your time, diminishes your worth, makes you responsible for his family's needs while ignoring yours. That's a form of abuse. Something broke in Emma then, and she began to sob quietly, years of pent-up confusion and hurt pouring out. I don't understand how we got here, Mom. In the beginning, he was so different, so attentive and loving. He made me feel special. That's often how controlling relationships start. I explained, drawing her into an embrace. They show you the person you want them to be until they feel secure in your commitment. Then the real person emerges bit by bit. We sat in silence for a moment, Emma's tears gradually subsiding as I rubbed her back, just as I had when she was a little girl waking from a nightmare. I need to tell you something, I said finally. Something I should have shared a long time ago. Emma looked up, wiping her eyes. What is it? Before I met your father, I was in a relationship very similar to yours with Jack. The admission still felt raw even after all these decades. His name was Richard, and he was charming, successful, and completely controlling. I didn't see it at first, just like you didn't see it with Jack. Emma's eyes widened. You never told me this. It's not something I'm proud of, I admitted. I stayed far too long making excuses for his behavior, believing I could fix him with enough love and patience. It took my own mother's intervention to help me see what was happening. What did Grandma do? Emma asked. She came to visit one weekend when Richard was particularly angry about something I'd supposedly done wrong. She witnessed him berating me, saw how I had changed, from the confident woman she'd raised into someone who apologized constantly and walked on eggshells. And she said something I've never forgotten. I took Emma's hands again, looking directly into her eyes. She said, Connie, love doesn't diminish you. It expands you. If you're becoming smaller in this relationship, that's not love. That's imprisonment. Emma's breath caught, and I knew the words had resonated with her own experience. That's exactly how I feel, she whispered. Smaller every day. Like I'm disappearing. You don't have to disappear, Emma. You can reclaim yourself in your home, but you have to decide that you deserve better than this. No one can make that choice for you, not even me. Inside the house, we could hear raised voices as the Sullivan family argued amongst themselves. Jack's voice rose above the others, defensive and angry. The facade of family unity had cracked completely. Emma took a deep, shuddering breath. What if I can't do it? What if I'm not strong enough to stand up to him? You are strong enough, I assured her. You've always been stronger than you know, and you're not alone. I'm here and I'll support whatever decision you make. But I need you to understand something important. I gestured toward the house. Those people in there. They've been planning this takeover since before your wedding. They never intended to stay temporarily. They saw an opportunity to solve their financial problems by exploiting your kindness, and Jack allowed it because it benefits him to have his family around supporting his authority. Emma's expression shifted from hurt to indignation. They planned this? Before we were even married, I nodded. I have evidence if you want to see it. Text messages between Jack and his father discussing the living arrangement opportunity your marriage would provide. A new emotion flashed in Emma's eyes, anger. Pure, righteous anger that had been suppressed for too long. Show me, she said, her voice steadier than it had been in months. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots Patricia had obtained. As Emma scrolled through messages discussing her as if she were simply a means to an end, a resource to be exploited rather than a partner to be cherished, her posture straightened and her jaw set in determination. They never saw me as family, she said quietly, just as a solution to their problems. And Jack allowed it, I added gently. He chose their comfort over your well-being repeatedly. Emma handed the phone back to me, her decision made. I want them out. All of them, including Jack. I squeezed her hand. Are you sure this is your decision, Emma? She nodded, a spark of her old self returning to her eyes. I'm sure I deserve better than this, and I want my home back. Together, we walked back into the house where the Sullivan family argument was still in full swing. They fell silent as we entered, all eyes turning to us. Jack stepped forward, his expression shifting to one of concern, clearly intended to manipulate Emma's sympathy. Emma, honey, your mother is overreacting. We can work this out as a family. You know how much I love you. Before I could intervene, Emma spoke, her voice quiet but firm. If you loved me, you wouldn't have invited your entire family to live in our home without a real discussion. If you loved me, you wouldn't have watched them treat me like a servant for months. If you loved me, you would have protected me, not exploited me. Jack's face hardened. That's your mother talking, not you. She's always been against our marriage. No, Jack. These are my words, my feelings. Emma straightened her shoulders. And my mother is right. I want everyone out of this house within 7 days. Including you. The room erupted in protests and accusations, but Emma stood her ground, growing stronger with each attempt to manipulate or intimidate her. When Jack grabbed her arm and tried to pull her aside, I stepped between them. Touch her again and I'll call the police. I warned, my phone already in hand. Asayasan. This is no longer a negotiation. It's a legal notification of eviction. Faced with Emma's newfound resolve and my unwavering support, the Sullivan family's power dissolved before our eyes. By the end of the evening, Jack's parents were already making calls to arrange temporary accommodations, unwilling to risk a public eviction on their records. Brian sulked, but began packing his few possessions. Ashley and her husband departed first, slamming the door behind them in a final display of entitlement. Jack was the last holdout, alternating between threats and pleas as he tried to regain control over Emma. But something fundamental had changed. The spell was broken. Emma saw him clearly now, not as the charming man she had married, but as someone who had systematically undermined her confidence and independence to serve his own needs. This isn't over, Jack warned as he finally gathered some essentials to leave for the night. You'll regret this, Emma. You need me. Emma stood in the entryway of her home, looking more like herself than she had in months. No, Jack, I don't need someone who diminishes me. I need someone who helps me grow, and that person isn't you. As the door closed behind him, Emma turned to me with tears in her eyes, but this time they were tears of relief, mixed with the grief of acknowledging a painful truth. What happens now? She asked. I put my arm around her shoulders. Now, one step at a time, you reclaim your life. Starting with a good night's sleep in your own bed without anyone making demands on you. For the first time in months, Emma smiled a real smile. It was small and tentative, but it was there, the first tender shoot of her true self beginning to re-emerge from the shadows. The road ahead would not be easy, but that night marked the beginning of Emma's journey back to herself. And I would be there beside her every step of the way, not to fight her battles for her, but to remind her of her own strength when she forgot. Sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give their child is not material possessions like a villa, but the courage to stand up for themselves and the unwavering support to rebuild when necessary. That night, Emma received both, and it would make all the difference in the world. In the days that followed my confrontation with the Sullivan family, the villa transformed once again. The departure of Jack and his relatives happened faster than the 7-day deadline I had imposed, with most of them cleared out within 72 hours. It seemed none of them wanted to risk legal action that might expose their financial situations or damage their carefully cultivated social images. Jack's parents were the first to leave Margaret, making a theatrical show of collecting her china and heirloom silver while making pointed comments about family loyalty directed at Emma. Robert maintained a dignified silence, though I caught him eyeing valuables around the house as if calculating their worth. I stayed close to Emma during their exit, a silent guardian against any last-minute manipulation. Brian skulked out the next morning, having helped himself to groceries and electronics that weren't his to take. Emma noticed but chose not to confront him, more relieved by his absence than concerned about the missing items. Things can be replaced, she said simply. My peace of mind is worth more. Jack himself was the most persistent, returning daily with new tactics to regain entry into Emma's life. He brought flowers, wrote apology letters, and even enlisted mutual friends to plead his case. When those approaches failed, he shifted to threats about divorce settlements and claims on the property, which I easily deflected with documentation proving the villa belonged solely to Emma and me. Finally, he resorted to sitting in his car outside the house, a last-ditch attempt at intimidation that ended when I calmly informed him that the next time he appeared uninvited, I would file for a restraining order. After that, he limited himself to text messages that grew increasingly desperate, and as Emma's responses became less frequent and more detached. Throughout this tumultuous period, Emma experienced a roller coaster of emotions. Some days she was confident and empowered, tackling house projects with renewed energy and reconnecting with friends she had neglected during her marriage. Other days, doubt and grief overwhelmed her, and she questioned her decision to end the relationship. "What if I'm overreacting?" she asked one evening as we sorted through kitchen cabinets reclaiming space that had been taken over by Margaret's excessive collection of serving pieces. "Maybe I should have tried harder to make it work." "Marriage takes work from both people," I reminded her gently. "You were the only one working while Jack and his family took and took." I stayed with Emma for those first 2 weeks, sleeping in the guest room and helping her reclaim her home inch by inch. Together, we repainted walls, rearranged furniture, and removed every trace of the Sullivan family's occupation. Most importantly, we talked honestly about the patterns of control and manipulation that had led to her situation. "I still don't understand how it happened," Emma confessed as we shared tea one evening. "I'm an educated, independent woman. I teach my students about healthy relationships and standing up for themselves. How did I miss the signs in my own marriage?" "Abusive relationships don't start with abuse," I explained. "They start with excessive charm, with making you feel special, with grand gestures like Jack's romantic proposal. The control comes later, so gradually you hardly notice it's happening." "But you noticed," Emma said quietly. "You saw the red flags from the beginning." "I had experience you didn't," I reminded her. "And even with that experience, I almost didn't intervene because I was afraid of pushing you away. It's a delicate balance between respecting your adult child's autonomy and speaking up when you see them in trouble." Emma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you spoke up, Mom. I don't know how much longer I could have gone on like that." By the end of the second week, Emma insisted I return to my own home and routine. "I need to learn to be comfortable by myself again," she explained. "To make decisions without checking with anyone else first." I agreed, though I still called every day and visited regularly. Each time I saw more evidence of my daughter's recovery. Her eyes regained their sparkle, her natural vitality returned, and she began to speak with the confidence and passion that had defined her before Jack. She filed for divorce with the help of a lawyer specializing in cases involving emotional abuse. The process was challenging but clarifying. As Emma reviewed the progression of her marriage through the lens of her attorney's questions, she recognized patterns she had previously excused or normalized. "I kept thinking it was temporary stress or that I just needed to be more understanding," she told me after one particularly difficult meeting. "But seeing it all laid out chronologically, there's no denying it was a systematic campaign to break down my independence." Jack contested the divorce initially, still believing he could regain control. But when Emma's lawyer presented evidence of the premeditated nature of the family's move-in scheme, including the text messages Patricia had uncovered, his position weakened considerably. His own family began to distance themselves, unwilling to be associated with such explicit manipulation once it was documented. 4 months after my dinner table confrontation, the divorce was finalized. Emma received full ownership of the villa. I transferred my share to her as a gesture of confidence in her independence. And Jack was ordered to pay a portion of her legal fees after the judge reviewed evidence of his deceptive behavior. The day the final papers arrived, Emma invited me over for a small celebration dinner, just the two of us in the dining room where the confrontation had occurred. The space was unrecognizable now, painted in warm colors Emma had chosen, decorated with art and photographs that reflected her personality, filled with the scent of a meal she had cooked for pleasure rather than obligation. "I never thought I'd enjoy cooking again," she admitted as she served a simple but delicious pasta dish. "They ruined it for me for a while, turning something I loved into a chore." "And now?" I asked, noticing the care she had taken with the presentation and flavors. "Now it's mine again. Now it's mine. Just like this house. Just like my life." She raised her glass in a toast. "To reclaiming what's mine, and to you, Mom, for helping me find the courage to do it." We clinked glasses, and I felt a surge of pride so intense it brought tears to my eyes. My daughter had faced one of life's most difficult challenges, the dissolution of a marriage and the recognition of betrayal by someone she had trusted completely, and she had emerged stronger and wiser. 6 months after the Sullivan family exodus, Emma had transformed not just her home but herself. She had returned to teaching full-time, reconnected with friends, and even started a small weekend tutoring business, using the guest house as her workspace. The garden that had been neglected during her marriage now flourished with vegetables and flowers, a visible symbol of her renewed care for herself and her environment. She began volunteering at a women's support group, sharing her experience to help others recognize the warning signs of controlling relationships. Her natural empathy, temporarily buried under the weight of her own struggles, blossomed again as she connected with women at various stages of similar journeys. 1 year after the confrontation that changed everything, Emma hosted a housewarming party, a symbolic reclaiming of her space, and a celebration of her new beginning. The villa was filled with genuine friends, supportive colleagues, and family members who had stood by her through the difficult transition. As I watched my daughter move confidently among her guests, laughing and engaged in animated conversations, the contrast with the subdued, anxious woman I had found in this same house a year earlier was striking. She caught my eye across the room and smiled, a full, radiant smile that reached all the way to her eyes. Later, as the party wound down and we sat together on the patio under the stars, Emma took my hand. "I've been thinking about what you said that night, Mom. About love expanding you, not diminishing you." I nodded, remembering the words my own mother had shared with me so many years ago. "I think I finally understand what real love should feel like," Emma continued. "It's not about sacrifice and servitude, it's about mutual growth and support." "Exactly, Batsa," I agreed. "Real love is like sunshine, not a cage." Emma looked around at her beautiful home, now truly her own in every way. "I'm not ready for another relationship yet, but when I am, I'll never settle for less than that kind of love." "You shouldn't," I told her. "You deserve someone who sees your light and wants to help it shine brighter, not someone who wants to dim it to control you." The journey hadn't been easy for either of us. There had been tears and doubts, legal battles and emotional upheavals. But sitting there with my daughter in the peace of her reclaimed garden, I knew every difficult moment had been worth it. Sometimes the most valuable thing we can offer those we love isn't protection from life's hardships, but the courage to face them and the unwavering support to rebuild afterward. Emma had discovered her own strength through adversity, and that was a foundation no one could ever take away from her again. As the stars twinkled above us, I silently thanked my own mother for teaching me that lesson so many years ago, creating a legacy of strength and independence that now lived on in Emma. Some gifts are passed down through generations, more precious than any material possession could ever be. The road to healing wasn't linear for Emma. In the months following her divorce from Jack, she experienced waves of confidence interspersed with periods of doubt and grief. Even knowing she had made the right decision, there was still a process of mourning the relationship she thought she had and the future she had imagined. "I keep thinking about what could have been if he had been the person I thought he was." She confessed to me one afternoon about 8 months after the divorce was finalized. We were sitting in her garden, which had become a therapeutic space for her, a physical manifestation of her regrowth. "That's natural," I assured her. "You're not grieving Jack himself or even the actual marriage. You're grieving the dream, the potential you thought existed." Emma nodded, her hands busy with pruning shears as she shaped a rose bush. "Sometimes I still catch myself thinking, I should check if Jack would like this for dinner, or Jack's mother would criticize how I folded these towels. Then I remember I don't have to consider them anymore, and it's like this wave of relief washes over me." "Those thought patterns take time to reprogram," I said. "You spent years trying to anticipate their needs and avoid their criticism. That doesn't disappear overnight." "The hardest part," Emma continued, setting down her tools and looking directly at me, "is forgiving myself for not seeing it sooner, for letting it get so bad. Sometimes I feel so stupid." "You weren't stupid," I corrected firmly. "You were being systematically manipulated by someone who studied your vulnerabilities and exploited them. That's not stupidity, that's being human." Emma had started seeing a therapist specializing in recovery from controlling relationships. Dr. Lena Martinez helped her understand the psychological techniques Jack had employed to gradually erode her boundaries and self-confidence. Dr. Martinez explained that it's like the frog in boiling water analogy, Emma told me. If you put a frog in boiling water, it jumps out immediately. But if you put it in cool water and slowly heat it, the frog doesn't notice the dangerous change until it's too late. That's what happened to me. Each individual request or criticism seemed small and reasonable at the time. The therapy sessions provided Emma with tools to recognize manipulation tactics and strengthen her natural boundaries. She learned to identify thought patterns that undermined her confidence and replace them with affirming truths about her worth and capabilities. As her emotional health improved, so did her physical well-being. The weight she had lost during her marriage gradually returned, giving her face a healthy fullness again. Her hair regained its shine and the dark circles under her eyes faded. She began jogging in the mornings and taking yoga classes, reclaiming ownership of her body after months of neglecting her own needs. The villa transformation continued as well. What had started as a purge of Sullivan family remnants evolved into a thoughtful redesign that reflected Emma's true tastes and preferences. She discovered a talent for interior design, creating spaces that were both beautiful and functional. I never realized how much I compromised on the decor even before his family moved in, she admitted as we admired her newly redecorated living room, now featuring comfortable furniture and vibrant colors that Jack would have disapproved of as too feminine or impractical. Jack always had the final say, even when I thought we were making decisions together. He would wear me down until I agreed with his preferences, then act like it had been a mutual decision all along. 9 months after the confrontation, Emma faced an unexpected test when she ran into Margaret Sullivan at a local grocery store. Jack's mother approached her with a facade of civility that quickly crumbled when Emma remained politely distant. She started out all sugary, asking how I was doing, saying she missed me, Emma recounted afterward. When I didn't respond with the warmth she expected, she switched to guilt tactics, talking about how Jack was suffering without me and how families should stick together through difficult times. How did you handle it? I asked, concerned about the encounter's impact on Emma's recovery. To my relief, Emma smiled. I looked her straight in the eye and said, Margaret, a family that truly cares about each other, doesn't treat one member as a servant. I wish you well, but that chapter of my life is closed. Then I walked away while she was still sputtering excuses. That small victory marked a significant milestone in Emma's journey. She had faced one of her manipulators directly and maintained her boundaries without anger or defensiveness. The encounter, which might have derailed her progress months earlier, instead reinforced her confidence in her decision. As the 1-year anniversary of her liberation approached, Emma decided to reclaim another aspect of her life that had been suppressed during her marriage, her dream of fostering rescue dogs. Jack had repeatedly vetoed the idea, citing everything from allergies he had none to property values as excuses. I've been volunteering at the shelter again, she told me over lunch. There's this sweet 3-legged lab mix named Sadie who needs a foster home while she recovers from surgery. I'm thinking of bringing her home next week. That sounds perfect, I encouraged. You've always had a way with animals in need. Jack always said pets were too messy and demanding. Emma reflected. Looking back, I think he didn't want me forming attachments to anything that might compete for my attention or give me joy independent of him. Sadie arrived the following week, her gentle personality and resilience immediately bonding with Emma. Watching my daughter patiently help the dog navigate the house with her new limitations, I saw parallels to Emma's own journey of recovery and adaptation. She's been through trauma, but look at her, Emma said one evening as Sadie dozed contentedly on a cushion by the fireplace. She's still capable of trust, still ready to give love. Dogs are remarkable that way. People can be remarkable too, I pointed out. You've shown the same resilience. Emma nodded thoughtfully. I suppose I have. I never thought I'd feel happy again after everything fell apart, but here I am creating a life I actually prefer to the one I had before. That realization seemed to unlock something final in Emma's healing process. She began to view her experience not just as a painful chapter to overcome, but as valuable wisdom that informed her new life and could potentially help others. She expanded her volunteer work at the Women's Support Group, developing a workshop called Recognizing the Red Flags that helped women identify early warning signs of controlling relationships. Her professional background and education made her an effective communicator, and her personal experience lent authenticity to her message. If I can help even one woman avoid what I went through or find the courage to leave a situation like mine, then some good has come from all this, she told me after leading her first workshop. The teaching position that had once been just a job became a calling again as Emma brought her renewed passion and perspective into her classroom. She incorporated age-appropriate lessons about healthy friendships and respecting boundaries into her curriculum, planting early seeds of awareness in her young students. 14 months after the night that changed everything, Emma hosted a special dinner party. In attendance were the key people who had supported her journey, me, her closest friends, who had stood by her, Dr. Martinez, who had guided her therapeutic process, and Patricia Mendez, whose investigation had provided crucial evidence. The villa, once a battleground of control and exploitation, had been completely transformed into a peaceful sanctuary. Every room reflected Emma's personality and priorities, from the colorful artwork created by her students that adorned the walls to the comfortable furniture arranged for conversation rather than appearance. As we gathered around the dining table where the confrontation had occurred, Emma raised her glass in a toast. To new beginnings, hard-earned wisdom, and the family we choose, she said, her eyes bright with genuine happiness, and especially to my mother, who had the courage to speak the truth when I couldn't see it myself. Later, as the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Emma and I stepped out into the garden, illuminated by soft string lights. Sadie followed, now fully recovered, and adopted permanently her three-legged gait, confident and steady. "You know what I've learned through all this?" Emma said, looking up at the stars. "True love, whether romantic, familial, or friendship, should make you feel more yourself, not less. It should add to your life, not diminish it. That's wisdom worth every difficult step it took to earn it." I agreed. Emma turned to me, her expression serene in the gentle light. "Thank you for that one sentence that changed everything, Mom. This villa is in my name, and Emma's name only." Those words gave me permission to reclaim not just my home, but myself. I hugged my daughter, this strong, compassionate woman who had walked through fire and emerged not just intact, but illuminated from within. Sometimes all we need is someone to state the truth we already know in our hearts but are afraid to acknowledge. Emma nodded. The truth that we deserve better, that we are enough exactly as we are. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey we had taken together. The villa I had purchased as a wedding gift had indeed become the foundation for Emma's happiness, though not in the way either of us had anticipated. Instead of housing a marriage built on control and exploitation, it now sheltered a woman who had rediscovered her worth and reclaimed her power. Sometimes, the greatest gift we can give those we love isn't protection from life's hardships, but the courage to face them and the conviction that they are worthy of better. Emma had found that courage within herself, and no one could ever take it away from her again. If you've ever found yourself slowly losing your voice in a relationship or watched someone you love fade under another's control, I hope Emma's story gives you courage. Sometimes all it takes is one moment of truth, one sentence spoken with conviction to begin the journey back to yourself. Thank you for listening to our story. If it resonated with you, please hit the subscribe button and leave a comment sharing any red flags you've learned to recognize in relationships. Your insight might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Remember, you deserve love that expands your world, not shrinks it. Until next time, this is Connie Matthews wishing you the strength to speak your truth and reclaim your power.